to DDRC members, staff, and guests. Multiple staff members are present to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and all applicants and citizens are able to communicate with the commission at the appropriate times. If you are here today and would like to speak about a case, please provide your name clearly into the microphone, and please be sure to sign in either at the back of the room or at the podium for documentation purposes. If you are here today to speak about a case, you must speak when the chairperson calls for public comment.
Now, I will read the roll. Ms. Gallo?
Here.
Mr. Greenberg? Here. Ms. Jaco?
Here.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Here.
Mr. McKenzie?
Here.
Mr. Salibi?
Here.
Mr. Shelton?
Here.
And Ms. Thomas?
Here.
We have quorum.
In order to avoid ex parte communications, DDRC members are under strict instructions not to discuss cases under consideration with the public or with each other outside of the public forum. The meeting typically starts with staff calling the case, giving a summary of the project, and then calling on the applicant to present if they wish. Decisions are typically made in one evening. Decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. Oaths will be administered individually as we hear either from applicants or from live speakers. Applicants with requests before the DDRC are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the DDRC or staff regarding the request. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. Applicants may have 5 minutes to respond. Staff has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. Are there any changes to the agenda?
We've had one change to the agenda. It's item number 2 under the consent agenda. This is 2703 Clark Street, which is a request for a certificate of design approval for construction of 2 duplexes in the Earlwood Protection Area, Area A, and this case has been deferred for the moment.
The DDRC uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. Staff, please review the consent agenda.
Certainly. The first item is 207 Watery Avenue, a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District, and it's also a pending landmark. The next is 1500 Senate Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for renovations to an existing structure. This is in the City Center Design Development District. And that is the consent agenda.
All right, is there anyone from the DDRC that would like to have any case removed from the consent agenda? Any item? No? Okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Once we approve the consent agenda, nothing on here will be discussed. I'm just double checking. All right? All right, so do I have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda and also approval of the August minutes?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda and the August minutes.
And I second.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes?
Ms. Gallo?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we'll move on to the regular agenda.
So I'm going to introduce Tristan Kircher. I think y'all have met him perhaps once before, although our new members would not have met him. Tristan has been working in the planning department for about a year, and he's now working on urban design projects. So he will be presenting The first case tonight, 1320 Washington Street.
So the first case on the regular agenda is in an urban design review district, city center. It is a request for certificate of design approval for new construction and site improvements at 1300 Sumter, 1334 Sumter, 1305 and 1313 Lady, and 1312 Washington. The proposal is for the new construction of a 5-story headquarters building and an adjoining 5-story parking garage. The headquarters building is a 5-story structure with a footprint of approximately 20,000 square feet. The roof level contains an additional 4,000 square feet of enclosed interior space, including a mechanical penthouse, warming kitchen, elevator, vestibule for access to an exterior covered roof deck. The total building area is approximately 104,000 square feet. The first floor contains the main building lobby with a security desk, a bank branch office, and an approximately 6,000 square foot leasable restaurant space with a commercial grade kitchen. A freestanding 10-story parking garage, 10-tier 5-story parking garage will be constructed right next to that headquarters building to provide parking. A building addition connected to the parking garage will contain a 3,000 square foot fitness center, amenities serving the headquarters building occupants, and a covered canopy will provide a connection between those two buildings, the garage and the main lobby of the headquarters building. In section 5.2, architectural style or theme of the design guidelines, staff finds that this project fits nicely into the context created by surrounding buildings. The brickwork and use of beige masonry cladding on the ground floor closely resemble the material palette of the 7-story structure sitting directly opposite this one on Lady. In section 5.3.4, horizontal rhythm and alignment of architectural elements, staff finds that the material condition of the ground and uppermost floors, which consist of imitation stone masonry, differ from that of the central 3 floors, which is red brick. And this contrast between light and dark materials allows for those central 3 floors to read as a ribbon that emphasizes the building's horizontality. That ribbon is also mirrored by the 4 stories of red brick sandwiched between an upper and bottom layer of the light stone in the building that sits directly across Lady. So again, mimicking the context around this site. In section 5.4.2, street orientation, staff finds that both the west and south elevations facing Sumter and Lady respectively are parallel to the streets they face. These 2 primary elevations of the proposed development actively engage the streets they face and are landscaped thoughtfully. The primary entrance to the headquarters building is clearly distinguishable and marked by an entrance canopy. The entrance to the restaurant space, which is right around the corner and on the south elevation of the headquarters building, is marked also by a large entrance canopy. These sit on the leftmost face of the south elevation and help activate the corner of Lady and Sumter. In 5.5, open spaces and private development, staff finds that the sidewalks lining this development along Sumter and Lady, because of their width, their detail and landscaping, and the richness of their paving materials, function similarly to plazas. Pedestrians walking along the sidewalks adjacent to this development will feel comfortable and safe from traffic along Sumter and Lady. Staff finds the width of the sidewalk along this stretch of Lady also allows for outdoor dining space, which is detailed in the architect's drawings. In the section on awnings and canopies, 5.7.1, staff finds that the pre-finished aluminum frames, which decorate a lot of the glazing on the west elevation of the parking garage, add a level of richness to that face, and that metalwork, in addition to the asymmetry of that elevation, help further distinguish it from the headquarters building that sits next to it. Recommended materials in section 5.7.2, staff finds that this project's composition and articulation of red brick and imitation stone masonry is a direct reference again to surrounding buildings, and that because of that, it's very compatible in this spot. On materials also in section 5.8 on the upper facade, staff finds that of the 2 masonry veneer samples submitted by the architect for cladding, that this is on the uppermost story of the headquarters building and parking garage, that staff finds that the option 2 with its smooth finish and neutral tone is most appropriate for this context. In section 5.10.1 on structured parking, out of necessity, the parking garage frontage does exist on a image street, which is Sumter Street. Staff, while it would be preferable for the parking garage frontage not to occur here, the detailed articulation of the sidewalk adjacent to this and along the stretch of Sumter helps to offset the disruption caused by this driveway entrance into the parking garage. The presence of a gym on that first floor in the parking garage structure, while it doesn't have a significant presence on the west elevation, does help activate the ground floor of the parking structure and similarly offset the harms of having an entrance there. The architectural quality of the parking structure in terms of materiality and building mass is also appropriate there. In all, staff recommends and finds that the project is in substantial compliance with the design guidelines and recommends granting a certificate of design approval with the following conditions. One, that option 2 of the samples provided for cladding on the uppermost story of the headquarters building and parking structure is preferable, but both would be considered recommended, although option 2 is preferred again. And lastly, staff recommends that any additional details or further changes to the design of this project come back for staff review. Thank you. And we have the architect present. Spencer Hutchinson is here to present his project.
Great. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, come on up and make sure you speak clearly in the microphone. Please state your name.
I'm Spencer Hutchinson with Quackenbush Architects.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
So I'm very excited this afternoon to present to you all this project on behalf of Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union and LCK, who's our construction manager for the project. We really do think that this is a super exciting project, that it's going to be transformative for this block and really represents a major contribution to continuing to improve our urban fabric and the character of downtown. So the site, as you all know, is on the 1300 block of Sumter Street. The existing Palmetto Citizens headquarters building sits right there in the corner of Marion and Washington Street. And so this project will move their headquarters building to the opposite corner. The existing headquarters building will remain in place. The site currently is a mix of surface parking lots, 2 vacant 2-story stucco-clad buildings, the pink one in the center of the block and the white one on the corner. And then there's a 2-story existing parking garage adjacent to that Concord building. Those 2 buildings and the existing parking garage will be demolished, as you can see here on this existing site plan, to clear out the site for the new headquarters building and garage. And you can see how the existing headquarters building sits relative to where the new buildings will go. So the site plan intentionally locates the headquarters building in a very prominent location, right on the corner between Sumter and Lady Street. The primary elevation of the building is facing Sumter, with the primary public entry into the building also off of Sumter, as you'll see. And like Tristan mentioned, the site is designed very intentionally here to respond directly to the architecture of the building. So the concrete banding that's mixed in with the paving materials are extensions of the geometry and massing of the headquarters building there. And of course, we've introduced a mixture of landscaping, including shade trees, some palmetto trees, to create kind of a plaza-like, very pedestrian-friendly environment. And you can see the parking garage there sits just north of the headquarters building. There's a 20-foot linear courtyard between the two. We've got landscaping in that courtyard as well. And then just to the north of the parking garage, that little rectangle building you see that's an addition to the parking garage, that is the 3,000 square foot fitness center amenity that serves the headquarters building. The service for the headquarters building is located kind of on the back of the building to the east. And so there's a dumpster enclosure back there with a screen wall. There's a mechanical equipment enclosure. And we've intentionally moved that stuff to the back of the building to reduce the visibility from the primary streets. There's a loading, unloading area there with direct access into the shipping receiving room. And then that one-way drive continues out to Washington Street to provide access for service vehicles. So as we were designing this building, of course, it needs to embody kind of the identity of Palmetto Citizens, but also a lot of thought and attention has been given to making the building a good neighbor and making it very contextual. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the context here, but sort of the three closest buildings to the site are 1310, the apartments at 1310 Lady Street, Palmetto Club at 1231 Sumter, and the Columbia Chamber at 1225 Lady. And as you can see, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of the material, the red or burgundy brick with the neutral masonry base and accents. So we took that as sort of an inspiration, very clearly tried to create a contextual building that responds to those neighboring buildings. The office headquarters building there on the right side of the page, it's organized into 5 bays, 4 typical 30-foot bays with 2 flanking that slightly wider 36-foot central bay. That helps denote the entry into the building. That's where that canopy is at the public entry into the lobby. And there's also a double height collaborative space on the interior on the 4th floor. And so it's also kind of accentuating that piece of the building there. We've got the cast stone bands and trim to articulate floor lines and further kind of reinforce that composition with the bays. And then the parking garage, you know, the architecture is clearly derivative of the office building, but we didn't want to just make a carbon copy to kind of help this avoid becoming visually monotonous. So we took kind of a different tact using the same palette of materials. And you can see those 2 elevations here together. So they read as a cohesive sort of pairing, but they have distinct identities, appropriately so, since they have distinct functions. The tower element there at the corner of the parking garage is the stair and elevator. And so that creates kind of a visual bridge between the 2 pieces there. Okay, so in terms of material, obviously the predominant material is a burgundy brick, modular size on the office and headquarters building. On the parking garage, that's a precast concrete structure. So we'll be using the brick in a thin brick format that'll be cast into the panels, but that brick will coordinate, of course, with the brick on the headquarters building. And then that neutral masonry veneer at the base and top and the banding. Like Tristan mentioned, we submitted 2 options that are kind of currently in consideration. Those 2 options just represent some slight variations in terms of the texture and finish, but visually very similar materials. At the parking garage, that neutral masonry would just be exposed concrete, since that is a precast concrete garage, and then the fitness center will be clad in the neutral masonry veneer. On windows, we're using a dark bronze. Sorry, trying to get this to click. There we go. A dark bronze frames, curtain wall storefront frames at the window openings. We've got varying thicknesses of framing members to give those openings additional layer of detail. The typical glass, obviously clear glazing, but then at that central bay where I mentioned that double height collaborative spaces, we're actually using a fritted glass there. That obviously gives some additional solar protection to that space since it's facing west. We're also using the opportunity to incorporate in a very subtle way, the Palmetto Citizens logo by subtracting out a negative of that logo from the frit pattern. So that's what you're seeing there in that central bay. So I include the floor plan just to show how we've really tried to push the public functions to the Lady and Sumter Street sides to activate the street. So the main building lobby has this linear orientation. There's a access from the side there. There's a covered canopy connector between the garage and the main building for visitors to the bank, employees coming from the garage. And then obviously the main public entry there on axis with the center of the building. And then the restaurant has a separate dedicated entry from the exterior off of Lady Street. A lot of glazing on the first floor, again, trying to make that activity visible out to the street, trying to clearly denote entry with the nice big canopy there in the center. And then you can see the parking garage, how it has a similar vocabulary, similar canopy denoting the vehicular entry, and similar curved gestures over the first floor windows to kind of tie the 2 together again. And then also just want to mention that we did, again, make an effort to push active programs towards the street. So we've located the bicycle parking just inside of the garage off of Sumter Street to make that, convenient, and also, again, trying to activate the street level with people coming in and out with their bicycles. And then that fitness center, like Tristan mentioned, does have a frontage out onto Sumter with glass so that that activity is visible. The south elevation facing Lady Street, very similar organization as the Sumter Street. But you can see there, there's a dedicated entry into the restaurant with a canopy that is similar to the main entry canopy, but visually secondary, intentionally so as not to kind of compete with that main lobby canopy. I think this was mentioned, there is a rooftop amenity that you can see there, a roof deck. But you can just kind of see here how that elevation wraps the corner. There are a few signage elements on the building that we have made an effort to scale appropriately and try to integrate them into the architecture. So there's the backlit Palmetto Citizen sign there that you see at the top, which is on both corners of Sumter and Lady Street there at the top corner of the elevation, and then the additional lettering at the main entry canopy into the public lobby, and then also on the restaurant. That is a leased restaurant space on the first floor, so obviously the signage will depend on who that tenant ends up being. And then the rest of the elevations that you all have seen from the packet we submitted. So we're very excited about this project. Like I mentioned, we think it's going to be a huge transformation for this particular corner, and appreciate y'all's consideration.
Yep, thank you, yeah. Any questions for any commissioners to our presenter?
The images you've included as part of your presentation, the masonry veneer, is that option 1 or option 2?
Honestly, they're very visually similar, and we've got samples here if you'd like to look at them. It's sort of representing either one, really.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It looks like a really great project, and I'm sure it'll be a great headquarters for the bank. I'm wondering how far we can push that and make this a really attractive pedestrian area as well. A couple of the questions I had were about the parking deck. There's a sheet in our packet. It didn't appear on the screen. L102, where there's an aluminum fence and grate, and I'm not sure if that's going to go in the parking deck somehow, or what is the parking deck ground floor going to look like to a pedestrian?
On the Sumter Street elevation, let me go back.
Yeah, Sumter.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we've got these decorative aluminum frames that span the intermediate levels there in the center, and it's a similar gesture on the first floor. So those are actually open, they're not glazed, but they'll prevent people from walking in and out of those first floor openings down there. But
So the ground floor is going to be open to the air, but visually porous?
Open to the air, and actually, if you look on, there is an access, it's kind of hard to see, but there is an access, pedestrian access into the garage from Sumter, but it's an open air condition there with the frame inside of that opening.
You mentioned the context, and there are some kind of brutal parking decks, 1300 and 1400 Sumter, and one of the ways they've tried to mitigate that hulking appearance is the one at 1300, I guess it's called the Meridian parking deck, actually has about 3 or 4 feet setback where there's art displays. And I wondered if you considered something like that to make it more attractive to pedestrians, or what the constraints might be for doing something like that.
Yeah, the one constraint that we do have is with that fitness center there on the north side, that we kind of have a circulation spine that's running north-south from where that double arrow is, showing the connection between the headquarters building and the garage. That kind of continues along to the west of the bicycle parking, and the entry into the fitness center is actually right there on the interior of the garage. So we did make an effort to not have vehicles parked, directly on that Sumter Street elevation. That was kind of the thought behind putting the bicycle parking there. I think logistically it makes sense for people coming in and out with their bikes, but also trying to activate that again with pedestrian type activity there on the Sumter Street side.
One of the things, if you're going to make this safe and attractive for pedestrians and this nice restaurant there, presumably you're going to want it open for evening.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you've considered putting lighting along the Lady Street section there. There's a lot of landscaping. There's going to be outdoor tables, but
Yes.
that side of Lady Street does not have any lighting. So it's kind of not that inviting to pedestrians right now.
Yes. Yeah, we will definitely have lighting along Lady Street because like you mentioned, there is outdoor dining that will sit just outside that glass on the south side of the restaurant. So we will definitely have some site lighting there to address that.
Street lamps or lighting from the building, or how's that going to work?
I don't know that we have gotten that far, but I would imagine it's going to be light, not on the building, probably light poles.
I don't think I had any more.
Oh, okay. Does anybody else have any other questions, clarifications? Yeah, it's an interesting point about the lighting. Yeah, I thought that's something for consideration. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We opening it up to public now, Amy? Yeah. All right, are there any members of the public that have signed up to speak on this case? No? Okay. All right, unless there's any follow-up questions for staff or anybody, if not, I'm going to open up the floor for a motion in a second.
This isn't a question, but just a recommendation. I know that the staff comments mentioned preferring one of the secondary cladding options for the masonry. I might just recommend that we not include that in the motion and maybe leave that to the design team. I think that both have certain merits and could kind of speak to the Palmetto aesthetic successfully. So I don't think that I would shoestring the design team with that just yet.
Yeah, does staff have any concerns with that?
I think that's perfectly amenable.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, it sounds like you're making a motion then, so.
First, okay, I know the motion has to say everything, so I would make a motion for approval of the design as presented with the caveat that any major changes to the design be brought back to the DDRC for review and approval.
Yes, and I think just to help, if you can, at the beginning of the motion, and because I know some of our newer, if you've not done it before, if you could at least note the streets that are included. Yeah, it maybe just even kind of read that top part there, that would be great.
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
Let's see. So I'd make a motion for the Palmetto Citizens Project proposed for 1300 Sumter Street and 1334, 1305, and 13 Lady, 1320 Washington, brought to us by Quackenbush Architects. Let's see. I want to make sure I hit everything that I need to. What was the section you wanted me to read? I'm sorry.
Just why don't you state there, like, the motion to grant the certificate of design approval for new construction, you know, the way it's like literally worded there.
Where's that wording?
Yeah, can you show them? Commissioner Wheaton? No, this is good, this is,
It's just under
we just
staff
expanded our commission, this is
recommendations.
good, it was good for us.
Certificate of design approval and any major changes be brought
Yeah.
back to DDRC.
Okay, so I would move that we grant a certificate of design approval with the condition that any additional details or further changes to the design of this project come back to staff for review.
Great, thank you. Looking for a second.
Second.
All right.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Ms. Gallo?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Mr. Ledecker?
Yes.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Mr. Salibi? Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
And Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Great. All right, thank you. Next case. Or yes, give us 1 second. I forgot. Thank you. All right.
Good afternoon. The next case is, this is 1101 Lady Street in the City Center Design Development District. This is actually an appeal to a staff decision for a change to an approved design. I'll just give a little bit of background on the project summary that was in your packet. For context, the building in question is the multifamily building at the corner of Lady and Assembly that was approved by the DDRC in September of 2019 and completed in 2022. At the time of the original DDRC approval, the first floor was programmed partly as parking concealed by a solid wall on Assembly and for a restaurant space with a double corner entrance, transparent frontage, and outdoor dining space on Lady Street. The mural on the Assembly Street side was provided to mitigate the lack of storefront and transparency on this major street frontage. Since, the building owner has been unable to secure a restaurant tenant for the space and ultimately settled on leasing to a bank tenant, which is an acceptable and allowed use, but arguably not as engaging to the public realm as a restaurant with outdoor seating. As part of the interior upfit of the space, the bank requested removal of 3 panels of storefront on the Lady Street facade to accommodate a walk-up ATM machine, as well as completely removing the entrance on Assembly Street to be replaced with clear storefront. Since removing transparent storefront from a primary corner is contrary to the design guidelines, urban design staff asked if the ATM location could be moved down Lady Street to the east, a bit farther from the primary street corner. There are a number of reasons why this was not feasible, the most compelling being the inability to make the ATM machine meet ADA accessibility guidelines. And there's a letter in your packet to that effect. Due to the physical challenges of the site, staff agreed to the ATM machine, staff agreed to the location next to the bank entrance with the condition that the wall panels surrounding the new machine, where the glass storefront was being removed, match the exterior cladding on the adjacent exterior walls, which is a Trespa Pura engineered composite panel, consistent with the existing first floor facade. The applicant agreed, revised drawings were submitted, and the commercial building permit was updated to reflect the approved change. In June of 2024, urban design staff attended a final inspection of the space to discover that the wall surrounding the ATM machine was stucco rather than the agreed-upon paneling. The applicant is appealing the staff decision to require the panels part of their certificate of design approval. There is a letter in your packet that details their proposed appeal. A number of the design guidelines and staff comments from the September of 2019 evaluation have been included for context in your packet, just highlighting the importance of this commercial space and the overall evaluation of the storefront design. And the staff recommendation reads that when the design of the original building was approved, the plans for a first floor restaurant and outdoor dining were intended to activate this important corner, as well as mitigate some of the building frontage that lacked features recommended by the design guidelines. While it is fortunate that this empty commercial space is occupied, the building's active frontage has been further reduced by the recent changes to accommodate the use for the bank. The finish of these panels, as agreed upon by the applicant and approved by staff, provide a consistent and coherent finish to the first floor facade, which utilizes 2 primary materials, brick and the engineered composite panels, in addition to the storefront glazing. Staff recommends denial of the request. And David Counts, the architect, is here to present their appeal.
Hi, yes.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, please state your name.
David Counts. I'm project manager at BDG Architects and a representative of Chase Bank.
Okay, good. And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you. All right.
So I'd like to address the comments. The first one here. So
Yeah, just make sure you've
Okay.
got it.
the first comment here, can you provide documentation demonstrating that the easternmost storefront cannot be utilized for the ATM? And it is true, the grade, the sidewalk slope, the running slope and the cross slope are greater than 2%. And the ADA guidelines for ATM is to have running and cross slope less than 2%. So what that would mean is we would have to rip up the entire sidewalk, which doesn't seem economically feasible to do that. That's first point. Second point is additionally, the material used for the infill area surrounding the ATM is proposed as stucco, painted to match the existing upper stories. And it continues to say there is no stucco used on the ground floor, the pedestrian realm. And that is true for Lady Street, except for the soffits. As you're walking down Lady Street, the pedestrian realm, as you look up, this stucco is used along all the storefront soffits. And then on Assembly Street, and I don't know if you can really tell from this image, on your right, at the right where you can see a vertical element coming down, there is stucco to the sidewalk. It's a small sliver, but that material is used on the ground floor. One of several of the issues that, if we were to change this from stucco to the panel or brick, is the ATM throat. It's not adjustable. And with the existing wall thickness, we typically have to use a very thin brick there. So we cannot use brick. Even if we could use a thin brick, it wouldn't match the existing brick. And the fiber cement panel, wood panel that is used, that's very difficult to match from batch to batch. So there would be a vast difference in the wood look. So, we are asking for acceptance of it as it currently stands. But, we would like to hear your comments. We could possibly paint that a gray to mute that color a little bit. But there's some ADA concerns with changing out that and the depth of the existing ATM machine. So there would be extensive rework of that wall if we were to look at other options, and then possibly some ADA concerns as well. I think that was basically the two comments that I saw on this. And do you have any questions?
Well, help me understand, I'm just trying to clarify in my head between you and staff. You had submitted the new plan, they agreed, understood the location needing to be on the other end, and you did submit the material that you would use, but then you decided to not use that, and you didn't go through staff to approve the change?
So
Am I understanding that right?
that I don't really know. I came into this project quite late.
Yeah.
The project manager that had this, I cannot say for sure what happened with that drop. It wasn't an intentional disregard, I can promise you that.
Yeah.
So I can't really speak to why one thing was submitted and then this is the result.
Right, well, that's the crux of this entire discussion, because no, we didn't have the opportunity to comment on a change that was made. I'll open up for any comments or questions of the applicant. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my own head around that.
Yes.
I think the party that's going to be most affected might be the tenant. Is there anybody here from the bank that wants to speak to a disruption of they just opened?
They did. They just opened. I've been asked to represent them, and they would be very unhappy with any kind of additional work. They have a strict timeline that they want to meet during construction. It's very aggressive. So the general contractor has worked to meet their deadlines because they have a point to where they want to start making money and they don't want to have to limit customer access. And this is a very active branch. I've been in there multiple times since it's been opened, and there's a lot of people in there, so they would lose business. Their preference is.
Did they say they would have to shut down the entire bank to do this
Yes.
repair?
Yes. Mainly because that's the only entrance. The entrance on Assembly Street was closed because of ADA concerns, and that's something on their top priority is the safety and welfare of the, passerby and their patrons. So yes, it would, because that storefront runs right into that wall. And without that wall, that storefront would not have its structural integrity. So they would have to close.
Just shut down this little bay and work there, but I'm not a contractor, but somewhere your contractor saw a set of plans and then went in a different direction. So that's, I guess, what our
Well,
big
I
issue
think
is here.
where I'm at mentally, and I don't know where the other commissioners are, and I don't know, have you and staff been talking about any options to make this more in compliance? Are there any? I mean, I know he mentioned, darker tinting or whatever, but I'm just curious, any thoughts on that?
I mean, it basically, it's just, there were a number of approved staff, changes that staff did approve to accommodate. The location obviously was one of them that,
Right.
ideally it was going to be further down, but because of ADA, staff approved this location. And then, removing of the other door, that was approved. And so it was just, the one condition was the siding material, and a full set of construction documents were submitted for that material to be, around the ATM machine. It's just one of those examples where, if there is an exception to be made, it needs to be made,
Oh, I
So, but
completely
I-
agree. I'm asking
so-
now, has there been conversations to talk about ways to maybe remedy this? Obviously having to do something. I don't know what that is. I was just
Right.
curious.
I mean, again, I don't know what is involved in like removing that surface and putting in the paneling. I don't know, again, if that means shutting down the bank. We have not discussed that. They just wanted to see if the stucco
Again,
finish
and I will
could be
even say
approved.
that's not my concern either.
Sure.
My concern is what can be done to bring this in compliance?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I'm sorry, but whether it causes a disruption at the moment, as just concerning as that is, it's more a concern of how to get us back into compliance. I don't know, and I'm let others speak. I mean, I just feel like y'all need to come up with a solution that's going to meet, meet the guidelines,
So I have a question for you. Is it that there's not a similar material on the pedestrian realm? Is that the main concern?
Well, I think as staff has noted.
I mean, it was just more consistent with the design of the first floor. The primary cladding was this truss bud Pura panel plus the brick. And that was the two primary materials for the design of this first floor storefront. So it just looks a little bit like a patch, because
Right.
that's what it was. And so I think that when the former staff was having that conversation at the time with the applicant, it was, well, we don't really like to fill in storefront on a major corner, but if this is necessary, then at least let's make it look as seamless as possible and consistent with the design. So, I mean, I'm not saying that this, necessarily does or doesn't meet the design guidelines. It's an exception from what was approved, which was trying to make, have the least negative impact on this street frontage from, a lot of sort of incremental changes that have happened over the last year or so
Sure.
to accommodate the bank use.
So the approved design was just use the same Crespi panel around the
Correct.
ATMs. It's just match it. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. And is that stuff available now?
Like I mentioned before, matching that
Well,
would be
this stuff's
very
it's got a variation in color like a tile, it's like a wood grain, so I wouldn't worry if it's a half a shade off toward tan or orange, but you can get the material, right?
Yeah, we can get the material. I believe Chase would be unhappy. They're very particular about the branding. And
So are we, so.
yes,
I mean, again, I feel like we're at we're going in
Right.
a circle here.
so one
you
of our
know?
proposed fixes is that we cut into that stucco to create reveals that would mimic the storefront, as you see in that picture on your right. To go back in and tear out all that stucco and put in a wood panel, manufactured wood panel that may not match would be a big endeavor and costly. So we're trying to avoid that if possible. But, we'll listen to
I
your
think, and
recommendations.
I'm not saying I'm sure what the solution is, but I think I'd prefer y'all coming back with some solutions to get it better into compliance. I think that's what I feel like I'm missing. I don't know, commissioners, help me out here. I think we need to see some solutions, okay?
So is the compliance that you want to see the wood, is that the compliant?
Well, I think there's a lot of different variations that were in there. I just don't know what all the creative solutions are.
I mean, that would be, the most consistent, there was something in I think the last correspondence that talked about not being able to physically use this material in because of the ATM machine or the dimensions, but there was a full set of construction documents that, showed details how that was going to be So it seems like it is physically possible. I mean, again, retrofitting it would obviously be a disruption, but again, we just have to, that's just not what was approved, that's all. So.
And I'm not trying to stifle the creativity here. I'm saying I would maybe go look at the guidelines and come back with some ideas that you feel meet all the objectives. I guess that's where I'm at. I feel like, we allowed a lot to get to this point, and now I think we deserve some consideration, at least to make the best effort we can to
Understand.
find some middle ground here.
Yeah, and I'll have to get some clarification because I understood the construction documents showed the hard coat stucco that we have. there.
No, as a matter of fact, when I went to the inspection, I was talking to the general contractor and pointed out that this wasn't what was approved, and he opened his drawings, and there was the drawing that was approved with the truss Pura panels. He had it, and just somehow, I don't know if he'd been using a different set, but and he was like, oh, we'll get this fixed right away. And then a couple months later is when it was, the conversation started about why hasn't this been fixed? And then that's where we ended up here. But obviously, there was more than one set of drawings.
Okay.
But I guess it would be helpful, I think, for staff because we're kind of at an impasse.
Yes.
If the DDRC could just, really either make a decision about whether this is acceptable or not, because, if they can't do brick because of physical constraints.
And say that, and I agree with you. I almost feel like we have to defer it because I feel like you need to come back with either some options.
I'm just not sure what the other options are.
I don't know either.
So, to me, if it's either let this, go as an exception, again, or require that the approved material is installed as it was drawn when the CDA was written, because otherwise, I think we'll just come back with, I'm not sure that there is
we'll be in the
another-
same place.
I do.
You do?
I'm not sure that there's
All right.
another solution.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. I'm just not sure. Yes.
I was just going to say, I do think that if you all are able to come with recommendations for the staff, I think that would be helpful. I don't think that we're able to approve, especially since it was the graphs initially were submitted and everything. But I think that you all should definitely come with some ideas and suggestions.
So you would want to see some renderings possibly of the options?
Well, let me respond to that, Commissioner, because I guess what staff's telling us, their concern is there is no other option.
Well, one option
Yeah, and that's where I'm not sure.
replacement and do
Yeah.
what was approved. That's option one.
Yeah,
to
that's
me.
option one.
What'd you say, Commissioner?
Option one would be the full replacement with the Crespi panel.
Back to the original
Matching as close,
concept. Yeah.
Match the batch, but I'm not saying there aren't other options that the commission might find acceptable and staff might agree with, so.
Well, and I think, and to add on that, when I asked staff, they're not clear of what any other options would be. So I think we're back to where we're here. We're back to square one.
Okay.
I will say, I think it would be an improvement to do what he's talking about with articulating the storefront mullion pattern and perhaps painting it a different color. Am I understanding it correctly that top left is as is and bottom right is like a photoshopped recommendation of how you would
That's
add those
correct.
reveals?
That's correct.
I mean, the darker color and the added dimensionality of the reveals, I do think helps it if it's going to remain as a stucco.
So there's two ways to go here, and I don't know, you know. Staff, clearly your opinion is, it's not what was provided, and I understand that.
I mean, again, exceptions are done.
Yeah.
It's just the process of having to go and have the commission, decide if it's a acceptable
Solution,
and that's why,
yeah. Yes, this is a tough one, because we know we don't like it when people do things and we don't have input, so we don't, we don't want that precedent either. Is there, thank you, is there any other questions for the applicant? I'm just going to make sure we don't have any questions or comments from the public. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public here to speak on this case here today? Okay. All right, any other questions to staff? I think we've done it. Well, I'm going to make the motion, and we'll see how everybody wants to roll, okay? I make a motion to deny the appeal to the staff decision for a change to an approved design for the project at 1101 Lady Street under the City Center Design and Development District guidelines.
Second.
They need to go to what they submitted, yeah.
Want to make sure.
That's the motion that's out there right now.
All right. Ms. Jaco?
Yes?
Ms. Gallo?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Mr. Lee Decker?
No.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
And Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, any other business?
Just wanted to mention that October is planning month, and so we have a few, do you want to mention what we're doing?
Yeah, we will be providing more information soon, but there will be a planning bike ride on October 20th, which is a Sunday, where we'll be highlighting some infrastructure projects and other things that are going on. And then on the 29th, we'll be having a book discussion at All Good Books in 5 Points. And it's, the book that's going to be discussed is called Paved Paradise. And it's actually tonight at the museum. The Columbia Design League is sponsoring the author of that book, Henry Grabar. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but it's
I
how
just
parking
realized
explains the world.
Andrew's missing our exciting news.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
someone grab him.
So that will be coming, and then, so we just encourage you all to, maybe participate or look at all the annual, hopefully the annual report will be out by then, but certainly we have monthly reports that talk about all the things that are going on in planning and also just planning and development services as a whole. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, and tomorrow is Parking Day, which we celebrate downtown, where we invite groups of people to take a parking space and do something creative and different with it other than using it as a parking space. So people do all kinds of fun things with those. So we encourage y'all, if you want to walk downtown, down Main Street, I think that's where most of the locations are, maybe a few side streets, where they'll be set up tomorrow starting around 10 until about 3. So that's always a fun day, and it's supposed to be beautiful tomorrow. And that is all the business.
All right. Well, with that, a motion to adjourn? Anyone? I assume that's a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn
All
from
right.
someone?
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.